Welcome, everybody. This is our session today on ways forward for Taiwan's participation in international organizations. And my name is Bonnie Glaser, and I am director of the Asia program at the German Marshall Fund of the United States. I'm so glad that you could all join us today for what is a very important conversation. Taiwan is largely excluded from international organizations in which the rest of the world shares information and makes critical global decisions. The island's more than 23 million people cannot reap the benefits that derive from full membership in most international organizations, and they're unable to contribute their well-developed knowledge and skills and resources to issues that directly affect them, such as civil aviation regulations, national disaster response and recovery, global health, and regional economic cooperation. So earlier this month, the foreign and development ministers of the Group of Seven and the High Representative of the European Union issued a joint statement that called attention to this matter. And I'd like to start by quoting from that document. It says, to strengthen global cooperation on issues of concern to all, we believe it's vital to ensure inclusive processes in international organizations. We support Taiwan's meaningful participation in World Health Organization forums and the World Health Assembly. The international community should be able to benefit from the experience of all partners, including Taiwan's successful contribution to tackling the COVID-19 pandemic. So the statement also underscored the importance of peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait, and it encouraged the peaceful resolution of cross-strait issues between mainland China and Taiwan. Now, the inclusion of Taiwan in the G7 foreign minister statement is unprecedented. The World Health Assembly is currently meeting virtually, but Taiwan, which has done a far better job of combating the spread of COVID-19 than most countries, was not invited. To discuss the issue of Taiwan's participation in international organizations, and particularly the World Health Organization, we're very pleased to have with us today representatives from the United States, the European Union, and Taiwan. So from the US, we have with us Jennifer Hendrixson White, who is Senior Policy Advisor at the US Mission to the UN Office in Washington, D.C. She was previously a senior professional staff member on the House Committee on Foreign Relations. From the European Union, we're delighted to have the EU's representative to Taiwan joining us from Taipei, Filip Grzegorzewski. He has previously served as chair of the Council Working Group on Asia, which is part of the European External Action Service. And he also held positions in the EU and in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Poland, as well as in Beijing, China. And from Taiwan, also, we are happy to have Ambassador Lily Xu, Secretary General of Taiwan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And she was previously Director General of the Taipei Economic and Cultural Office in New York. So just before we begin, I will note that we will leave about maybe 15 minutes at the end of the hour to take questions from members of the audience. And there are two ways that you can send questions. One is via email, and you would send your email to C Fowler, that's C, F as in Frank, OWLER at gmfus.org. So it's cfowler@gmfus.org. Or you can submit your questions on Twitter via the hashtag GMF Taiwan Forward. And we kindly request that you include your name and affiliation when submitting questions. So let's jump into this conversation. And I'm going to start by asking Jennifer, the G7 statement. Taiwan, of course, was an observer at the World Health Assembly from 2009 to 2016, but it's been denied attendance for the past 5 years. So why has such language been included now? What's changed?
Well, thank you for having me, Bonnie, and good morning and good evening to all of our participants today. I guess I would just start by saying that, of course, the United States has long supported Taiwan's meaningful participation in the work of the WHO and a participation as an observer in the World Health Assembly. We believe that Taiwan's inclusion would not just benefit the people of Taiwan, but the world and the WHO itself. And it's, I think, all the more true today as we seek to recover from a global pandemic. And COVID has underscored that we are all interconnected and we have to be able to work together to address cross-border challenges like global health. I think it's important to remember that although excluded from the WHO, Taiwan was one of the first health systems to alert the organization to the threat that was posed by the novel coronavirus in 2019. They learned of atypical pneumonia cases in Wuhan and asked the WHO for additional information. They didn't receive a substantive response, but nonetheless implemented strict border control and quarantine measures that very same day and launched a very successful campaign to limit the domestic spread of COVID-19 for 18 straight months. I think Taiwan's successes in addressing COVID-19 at home and its generosity abroad in the global effort to combat this disease have really provided the backdrop for U.S. efforts to support its meaningful participation in the WHO and the technical work of the WHO. And I think it's important just to underscore that keeping 24 million people out of a global conversation on public health, especially when they have demonstrated that they have so much to contribute and potentially so much to lose, negatively impacts on all of us. So I actually think it's easy to see why there's growing concern internationally about Taiwan's exclusion from these technical agencies, particularly the ones, as you've pointed out, that impact upon global health and safety, such as the World Health Organization and the International Civil Aviation Organization. So I was very encouraged to see the increased willingness of our G7 partners to express publicly their support for Taiwan's inclusion.
So, Filip, I'd really be interested in hearing the perspectives from Europe on this question. Why now? Why is the EU more willing than in the past to speak out publicly in favor of Taiwan's inclusion?
Well, thank you, Bonnie, first of all, for having me here. I'm really excited to be in this panel together with Lily, together with Jennifer. And I remember 2 years ago, less than 2 years ago, I traveled to Berlin from Taipei with a stopover in Brussels. I left all my luggage in a luggage room at the Brussels airport to go only for 1 day to Berlin for the GMF trilateral forum with Taiwan. And today it all seems like science fiction. We all stay at home, but thanks to technology, we can meet face to face and we can discuss again very important issues. And I know that there are many Taiwanese friends following this event, so allow me to begin by referring to the current outbreak of COVID in Taiwan. I understand that the mood has been dampened here in the last 3 weeks, but we need to keep in mind, not least in the context of today's discussion, that Taiwan has done and is still doing a great job in containing the pandemic. Yesterday, together with the representative of all EU member states in Taiwan, I had a virtual meeting with Health Minister Chen to discuss the current situation. And the EU can share our own difficult experience and our own hard-earned lessons. I must say that I admire the determination the Taiwanese people are showing in these very difficult days. When fighting the pandemic, Taiwan remains still an example to the world. This is something that I wanted to start with. So the topic of today's discussion is Taiwan's participation in international organizations. And for the EU, international organizations are the core of a rules-based multilateral order. The EU itself was born out of the need to transcend borders, to enhance cooperation among different states in the face of common challenges. And this approach has resulted in decades of peace and prosperity within the European Union. As we like to say in Brussels, multilateralism is in our DNA. So this discussion for me has a lot of sense. And I would like to touch upon three main points, if you allow me, Bonnie. I know that I'm talking too much, but I think this is important. I would like to say why Taiwan matters for the European Union, and that will be partially an answer to your question about the G7 statement. Then, if I can, I would like to say a few words about the EU-Taiwan relations, and then I would like to touch upon the international how the international community can boost Taiwan's participation in international fora. Well, why Taiwan matters for us? Why do we care? Why we thought that would be important for example, for the G7 statement? Well, for us, for the European Union, Taiwan is a like-minded partner. Despite the lack of diplomatic recognition, Taiwan shares with the European Union a system of governance based on democratic pluralism, the rule of law, and respect for human rights. And in April, the EU launched a new strategy, the EU's strategy for cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. And in this new strategy, all EU 27 member states agreed to work with partners in the region, focusing on practical cooperation to jointly tackle our common challenges, such as climate change, health crises, the diversification of supply chains, maritime security, cybersecurity. The EU's renewed approach is based on the promotion of democracy, rule of law, human rights, and international law. And again, not enough of me saying that these are the values that constituted the European Union, and this is why we care so much about promoting them. And in this context, we see Taiwan as an essential partner in the EU's engagement with democracies across the world and in the region. And Taiwan's vibrant democracy is an example for many people in Asia, and prove that transition from authoritarianism to democracy is compatible with political stability, economic growth, and general well-being. That's the experience of Taiwan. And Taiwan, for us, is also a key economic partner. It's not only the 21st largest economy in the world, but for us, for the European Union, it's our 15th trading partner globally, with a bilateral annual trade of some 50 billion euro. And the EU is the biggest foreign investor in Taiwan. This is something that not everyone knows, that actually the EU is the biggest foreign investor in Taiwan, with a total investment stock of 45 billion euro. Like the European Union, Taiwan embraces an open, free and fair, rule-based international trading system and pursues strategies to strengthen regional integration. So again, same agenda, same objectives. And last but not least, Taiwan is a high-tech leader and producer of critical goods that are highly relevant for the global economic development. And as some analysts have recently said, semiconductors are the new oil. Put simply, the digital world could barely function without Taiwan's technological know-how. And Taiwan has a strategic role in global and regional supply chains. But let me say just two sentences about EU-Taiwan's relations. You know that the EU is committed to its One China policy, which was spelled out in the EU strategy on China in 2016. And the EU's the EU's One China policy means that the EU recognizes the government of the People's Republic of China as the sole legal government of China. So within the limits of our One China policy, we treat Taiwan as a reliable and important like-minded partner. And the EU and Taiwan hold regular exchanges, such as our annual consultations on sectoral policies, on trade consultations, human rights consultations. And we often cooperate and exchange information on a wide range of issues, including connectivity, innovation, digital issues, green energy, circular economy, you name it. And in the context of the new Indo-Pacific strategy that I've just mentioned, the EU still wants to keep strengthened ties and cooperation with Taiwan, even in the absence of diplomatic recognition. And now the topic of the day, international participation. The EU promotes pragmatic solutions to foster Taiwan's meaningful participation in international fora. So that's the element that Jennifer has just mentioned as well. Meaningful participation wherever this is consistent with our policy on China, and whether it's also in line with our interests. So Taiwan simply really matters for us enough to keep mentioning it.
Thank you so much, Philip, for that very, very comprehensive statement. And I will turn to you, Lily, and first express also my concern, our concern, certainly, I'm sure, shared in the United States and many other countries about the current outbreak in Taiwan. I'm sure you will all get it under control quickly. We in the United States and, of course, in so much of Europe have been suffering for many, many months. And hopefully Taiwan will not have to face the circumstances that we have faced here. So let me ask you if you could perhaps talk in somewhat maybe concrete terms about what the impact has been on Taiwan of the exclusion from WHA, the World Health Assembly meetings, and many of the technical meetings of the World Health Organization that I know Taiwan has been invited to, but not been able to participate in. And I'll give a statistic that I read yesterday, that Taiwan applied to participate in just under 200 WHO technical meetings between 2009 and 2020, but was only allowed to attend 30% of those. So with that, maybe you can tell us from your perspective what the concrete impact has been.
Well, thank you, Bonnie. Let me start with thank you for letting me have this opportunity to exchange views with my fellow panelists, and thank you for your interest and your support over the years. Well, let me also talk a little bit about the current pandemic domestically, because this is quite a challenge. And indeed, our overall response to the pandemic in the past year, no matter it's the successful control of the pandemic or the current challenge we are facing in tackling the surge of the domestic cases, it all show that we are in this together. It is demonstrate and prove once again that Taiwan is an integral part of the global health system. So yeah, I appreciate this opportunity to share with you the difficulties and why it's so important for us to be included in the World Health Assembly as well as the World Health Organization. Now, Taiwan has been campaigning for WHO observership since 1997. And believe me, in the early stage of the campaign, it is not the case like now. We have come a long way to achieve such progress like the G7 statement, and which send out a powerful message, and it is very encouraging. We are very grateful for that. But because our friends see the value of Taiwan can contribute to this global health cooperation. And along the way, through our campaign, we also demonstrated that our track record shows that we are a trustworthy partner in this fight together. So let's come back to this WHA thing. WHA is the decision-making body of WHO. It sets the agenda and provides key platform for strengthening international cooperation to advance global health, and particularly in this year to fight the pandemic. Now, without observer status, Taiwan is not able to partake in the discussions and the formulations of best approach to fight the disease, nor can Taiwan exchange ideas with other countries for better recovery. Equally important, I have to mention, especially during the global pandemic, it is very important for our health experts to partake in the many technical discussions during WHA sessions, happening during the WHA sessions. Currently, we are granted very limited access to WHO technical participation, which fall far short of meeting our urgent needs. As Bonnie just mentioned, only 30% of acceptance of our application to participate in the WHO technical meetings. Now, if we believe with the WHA observership, it can facilitate our technical cooperation with WHO. Let me also take this opportunity to illustrate a little bit about the established procedure abided by WHO Secretariat, which is based on a secret MOU signed between WHO and China in 2005. It places unreasonable restrictions and imposes lengthy process regarding Taiwan's technical participation. It requires the Secretariat to seek China's approval before issuing invitation to Taiwan. So with China calling the shot and dominating rules of the game, our participation can barely be meaningful. And this is hardly sound global governance that we all want to see. The technical difficulties we are facing have consequences. That means for now, our technical experts can only have contact with the legal department, rather than they cannot have direct access or direct contact with WHO technical department. There are so many gatekeepers, so to speak, in WHO. WHO Secretariat, rather than a facilitator, they are gatekeeper. So we need to work hard with the like-minded countries' help to urge this organization to be apolitical, inclusive, and professional. Our health experts' participation need to be judged on their own merits rather than politicized. And I also want to follow up on Filip's comments when you said that use one China policy and things like that. Now, when we started this campaign, we know the political complexity or sensitivity about this whole thing. So we try to avoid these, we try to gain more support from the international community. That's why, starting from the beginning, we only seeking for observership rather than membership. And we also want to demonstrate along the way that we need to be partake in a substantive and professional manner regularly. I think I stop here and now.
Thank you so much. So let me now turn back to Jennifer and ask, in the wake of this G7 statement, I'm sure the US, the EU would like to build some to build on this momentum. So what are the steps that like-minded countries can take to push for the restoration of Taiwan's observership in the World Health Assembly and for its meaningful participation? And maybe as part of that answer, you can explain what meaningful participation means from the U.S. perspective.
Sure, happy to do that. And first of all, I should just acknowledge that we were very disappointed that Taiwan was not able to participate in the WHA meetings that are ongoing right now. And I think it is very important for like-minded member states to continue to raise these concerns at very high levels within the UN system and also with other member states. And the United States will certainly continue to do that. And they will call on the WHO to take the inclusive approach that Lily spoke about and that Filip spoke about when responding to disease outbreaks and other important global health issues. I think this is critically important. I also think we have an opportunity to encourage our partners to creatively expand their cooperation with Taiwan, to continue to demonstrate, as Lily has said, that Taiwan is a credible and generous and technically very capable partner in global health issues. The United States has benefited enormously from years of public health cooperation with Taiwan. And following the COVID outbreak, we expanded our public health cooperation with Taiwan by signing an MOU between HHS and Taiwan's Ministry of Health and Welfare to promote increasing our cooperation. So I think we would also encourage our partners to tap into Taiwan's expertise through similar arrangements. And although I can't really speak to specific diplomatic efforts that are underway right now, I really continue to be impressed how this administration is being so forward-leaning in implementing the president's instructions for us to find ways to increasingly improve our participation and cooperation with our partners, of which Taiwan is certainly one.
Filip, is there something you can add from the EU perspective? I think you're muted. I cannot hear you.
We cannot hear.
We cannot hear you.
It must happen at every video conference.
Okay.
We believe that Taiwan should be included where its technical competences and capacities bring an added value. This is very simple. And the coronavirus outbreak is a clear case where Taiwan can bring in its experience. And the G7 statement, the G7 Foreign and Development Ministers meeting statement was very explicit there, and there was full support for Taiwan's meaningful participation in the WHO forums, and the WHA expressed that, and the international community should be able to benefit from the experience of all partners, including Taiwan. And in parallel, of course, I would like to echo what Jennifer was saying. The EU will continue to develop cooperation with Taiwan on health and other issues of global interest. I was really proud recently when Taiwan received shipments of COVAX vaccine. EU was among those who were really pushing very hard to establish COVAX as a mechanism to share vaccines globally. And I'm really happy that Taiwan can benefit now from this mechanism. So when Taiwan was hit by this outburst of the pandemic recently, and everyone was desperate to get a vaccine, I was really proud to see that there was a plane coming from Europe transporting 400,000 doses of COVAX COVID vaccines. But I wanted to give you two recent examples of our work on health issues that we have been doing here in Taipei. Last month, we co-organized the first EU-Taiwan Health Forum together with the ECCT, with the European Chamber of Commerce in Taiwan. The European Chamber of Commerce in Taiwan is the biggest chamber grouping foreign companies in Taiwan, and together with the ECCT, we've organized the first EU-Taiwan Health Forum. In cooperation, the health sector is one of the priorities for our Indo-Pacific strategy. And 2 weeks ago, we participated in the GCTF workshop on vaccination, together with colleagues from the US. So Jennifer, I'm sure you're well aware of that, but also with Japan, with the UK, with Australia, with Israel, with Canada. And the EU provided a speaker for the workshop to present the EU's vaccination strategy, explaining the procurement, the rollout strategies, and the related EU initiatives. So I think that was a very practical, positive contribution, something we could continue to do in the future.
So since you've mentioned COVAX, Lily, let me ask you about Taiwan's participation. It's that it actually joined COVAX was such a good development, but does Taiwan have the same status, the same access, the same interactions or ability to get what it needs as those member states of the UN? I understand Taiwan is a self-financing entity. Maybe you can explain what that means, and is Taiwan's access sufficient?
Well, I cannot go into details about the COVAX things because there are a lot of information I'm not sure I can disclose right now. But it's good that Taiwan can be involved in the COVAX system, the whole region, because definitely vaccine is the most important thing right now. Let me just also share with you that many of you are aware Taiwan is now developing our own domestic developed vaccine, and the earliest possible date will be in July for our vaccine is ready for use. But before that, because of the recent outbreak, we desperately need vaccine, and we need assistance. Philip and Jennifer, we do need assistance in getting the vaccine supply before our domestic vaccine is ready for use. So the COVAX system help us in getting vaccine, but the volume and the quantity is really still limited. We are waiting for it to come as soon as possible to help us tackle this domestic surge of a pandemic.
So, Jennifer, does the United States play a role in helping to convey information to Taiwan, since it is actually not, as we know, present at the World Health Assembly meetings? Is this one of the important roles that the United States plays, or are there other ways? Maybe Lily can also mention if there's other ways that you receive information about what happens at these meetings.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I mean, with respect to the WHA meetings that are ongoing right now, I know that the U.S. delegation makes it a point to meet with Taiwan on the margins of these meetings and to encourage our other partners to do the very same thing. Of course, this year's meetings are taking place virtually, so I'm not sure if there's a breakout session button in the WHA platform or not, but regardless, we maintain regular communication with our counterparts in Taiwan, including at senior levels. I know the issue of vaccines that Lily was just raising was something that was discussed between HHS Secretary Becerra and his counterparts in Taiwan very recently. And, so the U.S. is very aware of and concerned with these developments and maintains regular communication, with Taiwan on all these kinds of matters.
And Lily, can you tell us what's happened in prior years when there were actually meetings in person? How quickly does Taiwan get information? And when there's technical meetings that just WHO related meetings that Taiwan is excluded from, how do you end up getting information about what was discussed?
Bonnie, I presume you are talking about after the 2016, since we were not being able to participate as observer. well, I should say our health officials and experts were really very diligently getting information whenever and whatever they can. So even without an invitation, they invite themselves, so to speak. They organize a delegation and being in Geneva physically and trying to secure bilateral meetings with our diplomatic allies and with like-minded countries, and even with some technical professionals to exchange views and gather information and trying to get the real-time information about what's going on, what's being discussed. And I think this kind of situation offsets some kind of, but this is still indirect, not real time enough, especially during the pandemic. This is what we are concerned about. And although I should add, just like Philip and Jennifer mentioned, because of our campaign, because like-minded countries' awareness of our situation, they always try to provide information to us through bilateral channel. And I would also like to emphasize the multilateral part of the creative way of helping Taiwan in step with the international norm, that is GCTF. This forum, since 2015, has been developed into a very important platform for Taiwan to share our expertise, our experiences, and also exchange views with fellow participating countries. So through this platform, this is a very practical way to help Taiwan to gather information, to exchange views. And we are very appreciative of this.
Great. Well, both you and Philip mentioned GCTF, so I should tell our listeners, in case you don't know, GCTF is the Global Cooperation Training Framework, and it was started by the United States and Taiwan to convene workshops on really important and pressing issues where Taiwan has expertise, and representatives are included from, first it started around the region, but really now has been expanded internationally. And there have been, I'm trying to remember how many workshops. Do you know, Lily, off the top of your head?
Oh yeah, my colleagues probably can help me. There are so many. It's been a lot. Actually, today here in Taipei, this morning, just have a money laundering workshop. Yeah, so there are so many of them.
Yes, I think it's over 50, if I'm not mistaken. And they have been on women's entrepreneurship, and as you say, money laundering, media literacy,
Yes.
A range of really important issues. I'd like to ask Philip about EU participation. I should mention that Japan is now a full partner
Yes.
with the US and Taiwan. So what are the prospects, perhaps, of the EU joining as a full partner?
The European Union is here, and we, with our office, do participate ad hoc in the GCTF initiatives and the GCTF workshops, seminars, conferences on, I would say, case-by-case basis. Wherever we see that we could contribute to the discussion, we do jump in, and we are happy to be there and to engage in discussions, provide experts, and I can think of at least 2 or 3 quite memorable ones where we were really I think making a difference and sharing the experience that was needed in Taiwan, but was also beneficial for us. So one was on global supply chains. That was I remember a very good discussion, and another important one was on vaccination, where our expert from the European Commission shared our experience on the rollout of the vaccines, on the strategies. So the GCTF plays a role here, on ad hoc basis we'll continue to participate whenever we can contribute usefully and whenever it fits also the EU's interests.
Yes, Lily.
Only just to share some information. Now I have the data here. Since its inception, there have been 32 GCTF activities, invited more than 80 countries, more than 2,000 government officials, experts to participate in this platform. So it's really quite fruitful.
Yes, I think the lesson of GCTF is that we all need to think creatively to find ways to enhance Taiwan's participation, and that I think just has been a really successful opportunity. Let me, before we turn to some questions from viewers, ask you, Lily, what other UN agencies Taiwan seeks to expand its membership in and why?
Okay, now let me just starting to share some kind of our position or our strategy approach toward our international participation. Now, considering multilateral mechanisms are key platforms for global governance, Taiwan actually is out of practical needs. Taiwan pursues international participation because these platforms are where global challenges are addressed, international norms negotiated, and global cooperation coordinated. We aim for functional organizations that are vital to our national development and the people's welfare. Given that United Nations system is the most important platform for handling global issues, Taiwan is focusing primarily on seeking meaningful participation in the United Nations system, particularly the UN specialized agencies that deal with public health like WHO, the climate change, UNFCCC, and aviation safety, ICAO. Other than that, we also pursue other non-UN multilateral bodies like the Interpol that combat crime, or multilateral trade regimes that concern our economic development and prosperity, including the CPTPP. Now that's the overall picture, but let's come back to the why or the reason behind our meaningful participation in certain United Nations specialized agencies. Take ICAO, for example. Taiwan is a key air traffic hub in East Asia. The Taipei FIR covers some of the busiest airspace in the region. Now, the number I have here is in 2019, the Taipei FIR handles the volumes of cargo and passenger flights is over 1.8 million air traffic control services and nearly 72 million passengers. So that's a big number. Now, we have worked very hard, I think, our Civil Aeronautic Administration. They are working extremely hard to align our regulations and practices with ICAO standards to ensure flight safety and security. Now, Taiwan seeks regular participation in ICAO meetings and direct access to its database to keep track of the up-to-date international regulations, especially in the post-COVID era. We all face challenges when preparing to open up borders and resuming normal air travels. Now, if we can be able to include it in the ICAO family, it would be very important, it's critical for us to ensure a smoother transition into post-pandemic operations. That is the aviation part. And concerning the climate change, UNFCCC, at the moment, Taiwan can only attend the annual COP meeting as an NGO observer. So we are not able to partake in the decision-making process or the UNFCCC initiatives. Our lack of access to UNFCCC mechanisms has weakened our ability to formulate adaptation strategies. our exclusion from the UNFCCC climate finance mechanisms make us vulnerable to the high economic cost of carbon reduction measures. And if I may, to take a little bit more time to talk about another very urgent need that we have to tackle vis-a-vis the UN system. Many of you know our civil society and NGOs are a very important part of Taiwan's international participation. They are active in participating in the international activities and meetings. But because although the UN is promoting inclusive multilateralism and encourage civil society's engagement, our people have been denied access to any UN meetings or events simply because UN reject to recognize Taiwan passport as a valid ID. And actually the obstacles are multiple. They started from the registration process without any category for Taiwanese civil society or NGOs to register, to be shut at the door because their passport is not recognized as valid ID. So this is a very serious issue. It's concerning, very importantly, with our international participation. That is our people. They need to have access and they need to engage internationally. That is something that I want to also share with you.
We'll now move to some questions that we have received and see if we can squeeze in a few of them. And I'll start with Jennifer. We've received a number of questions about the approach that the US and also the EU should have to expanding Taiwan's participation, and basically questioning, should we be focusing on individual agencies in the UN, or is there a way of addressing more broadly Taiwan's meaningful participation in the UN overall? And I know it's very complicated because I myself did a project a few years ago and published a report where we looked into the charters of these individual UN agencies and found they're all very different. And it really complicates when you think about, Taiwan can potentially become an observer of one agency, but maybe another agency doesn't even have provisions for observer status. So I'm wondering, how are you thinking about that issue?
Thanks for the question. I mean, I think this is something that we're thinking quite a lot about. And I don't know if it's an either or kind of a situation. But you are quite right that the international system is incredibly complex. And each organization has its own particular way of governing itself. And I think it's really incumbent upon us to sort of both work at the organizational level to identify where Taiwan is really able to contribute meaningfully, as we've discussed in so many ways in this conversation, but also to continue to raise the point that Taiwan's exclusion doesn't make sense for the rest of the world, doesn't make sense for Taiwan. It's not good for the objectives that these organizations are seeking to achieve. I think it's important for us to remember that Taiwan is a part of the global community. And as we've been discussing health so much this morning, they've admirably handled the COVID-19 pandemic. They have a lot to contribute to the WHO. And I think, it's important for us to underscore that Taiwan's participation is fully consistent with all UN General Assembly and WHO resolutions on this question. And I would also just highlight something that Secretary Blinken offered when he spoke to the Security Council earlier this month. He said, human rights and dignity are at the core of the international order, the foundational unit of the United Nations. The very first sentence of the Charter is not the nation state, but the human being. And I think that we can continue to make that well understood, with our partners and continue to advocate for Taiwan, both, in a sort of broader sense, but also through individual organizations where Taiwan really has a lot to offer.
Yes, a terrific statement. Absolutely, human conditions and addressing human needs should be at the top of our list. So I have a question from Tina Chung, who is a reporter from the Voice of America Chinese branch, and I'll pose this to Lily. Can you explain the issue briefly, since it is complicated, of the 1971 UN Resolution 2758 on China's representation and why it's an obstacle to Taiwan's participation?
Okay, let me try to be brief to let you know about our position toward this vis-a-vis this resolution. Now, the 1971 Resolution 2758 only addresses the question of China's representation. It makes no reference to Taiwan, nor does it allude to Taiwan's international status. Moreover, it does not conclude that Taiwan is a part of PRC. Absolutely not. So, however, Taiwan's international participation has been politicized over the years by China's inappropriate and erroneous interpretation of this said resolution. And it's sad to see that the United Nations legal department and other organizations, secretariat, kind of told the political line with China. So that's why when I just mentioned the passport issued by our government cannot be recognized as a valid ID, that is also part of the reason they have this kind of a wrongfully interpretation of the said resolution.
I'll turn now to Philip and ask you a question from Charles Parton, who is Senior Associate Fellow at RUSI in London. And he essentially, of course, highlights that there's so many member states in the EU and they have different policies and positions, although all do, of course, have a one China policy. And so how is this complicating the EU's approach to promoting Taiwan's international participation? And he particularly highlights in his question Hungary, which tends to be more supportive of China and has posed problems, for example, as we know, in discussions about Hong Kong.
Well, thank you for this question coming from a friend of the European Union, but also we managed we had a chance to interact together in my previous capacity and in his previous capacity. So it's a small world. One China policy is our approach, our common approach of all the member states and the EU as such to China. And it's a constant basis of our relationship also with Taiwan, and we develop our relationship with Taiwan within the limits of the One China policy, of course. The way the EU works is a political miracle. You have 27 different visions, you have 27 different policies, and still we managed to come up with a joint position. My previous job was to do exactly that, to chair the working group on Asia within the Council of the European Union, the working group called COASI, and the objective of the meetings of this group is to bang the different ideas and the positions of the member states, and at the end of the day, to conclude with something. And my job was to steer the discussion into having a conclusion. But luckily, with the One China policy, there is no discussion. I mean, we all follow the same policy of recognizing only Beijing. Well, at the same time, we managed to have a deep really deep discussions with Taiwan, deep exchanges with Taiwan on a vast set of issues. Taiwan is an important, really important economic partner for us, but we also value this partnership with Taiwan, and the best proof is that our investors, the European investors, are so much present in Taiwan, with 1/4 of all the FDI stock in Taiwan coming from the European Union. So we vote with our money, and we contribute to Taiwan's prosperity. We contribute to Taiwan's development, and also through our investments in Taiwan. For example, in the offshore wind sector, we contribute to the internationalization of Taiwan. We promote our standards, and by doing so, Taiwan adopts these standards that are international, and it internationalizes Taiwan. So we clearly will see it as a win-win, and we are very happy with this partnership with Taiwan.
That's great. Okay, maybe I'll just squeeze in one short last question in our final minute, which I will ask Lily, which comes from Hiro Akita, who is a commentator at Nikkei, and he is interested in how Taiwan is responding to the fact that China is offering Taiwan's vaccines, which he says is a form of diplomatic leverage. I think the interesting part of his question I'd like to highlight is how people in Taiwan are reacting to this offer. Is this something that is very? I expect it's very divisive in Taiwan.
Yeah, indeed, very divisive. That's why I don't think I'm in the position to comment on that, because it's more suitable for our mainland affairs councils to answer that question. But more related to my work is we've seen China offer the vaccine, so-called vaccine diplomacy, to some of our diplomatic allies and use that as a leverage to try to maneuver their position vis-a-vis Taiwan. So I think with vaccine, personal view is it needs a lot of trust. People who want to have the vaccine, they need to trust the vaccine, right? So, and that's my short answer.
I think that's a very good answer. And the case, of course, you didn't cite, but recently reported was Paraguay, in which China did apparently try to offer vaccines in order to poach yet another of Taiwan's diplomatic allies. So vaccine diplomacy is something that is very real, and I think that we should all be first and foremost concerned about health. But mutual trust is essential, and I hope that we can, going forward, build more mutual trust for Taiwan around the world, and help Taiwan. And I love your slogan that Taiwan can help. And Taiwan indeed has done so much to help. And I think
I do have a mask here say Taiwan can help. I should put it on.
Well, I think the United States and the EU are working together on this very closely. In the UN, certainly focusing today as the World Health Assembly is meeting, but also going forward on Taiwan's participation more broadly in the World Health Organization, and as Jennifer mentioned, in the UN overall. This has been a long-standing problem since 1971 that I think ultimately does need to be addressed. And so I thank you all for joining us today for a really terrific discussion. Lily Xu in Taipei, and also Filip Grzegorzewski, also in Taipei, and Jennifer White here working at the UN mission in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us today for this great conversation.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye. Have a